All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's see if we are truly live. Okay. Whoa. All right. Let's wait for people to arrive here. Okay. Hopefully we're live. Yeah, should be working. Um, let's see. So a lot of things have happened this week. A lot of well, a lot of strange bedfellows. What a strange trip it's been. But let's wait for people to pour in. Massive McGee, can you hear me, my friend? Is it good? Um, I'm gonna. I mean, it won't be as fiery, I think, as the last stream. But I think the purpose of oh, that's good, loud and clear. The purpose of laid back Saturdays is to actually lay back and kick it up. You know, to sort of do things that I normally don't do because I do want to get back into doing art videos, but YouTubing is like a lot of persistence. But I do have an exciting announcement. I have, well, I think the title will be the Content Minded Podcast. Hello, Nico. Hello, Jimukami. Hello, and I can't read acrylic. I'm very sorry, my friend. Uh, Hi, Boses. How are you doing? So, anyways, my podcast, I think I'm going to stick to one on one interviews because laid back Saturdays is like, I'm just kicking it back, I'm doing stuff. Um, but I'm going to be doing, hello, Philip Daniel. I'll probably bring Philip Daniel on the show at one point. Or, well, I want to do one on one interviews, maybe one or two people, and it's going to be called the Content Minded Podcast because like I do my annual or semi-annual well, not like over the compilation of a few years, my roundup of essays on my old WordPress called Content Minded. I have volume 1 and 2, and Content Minded is just to round up all of the like little disparate articles that I did over the years from 2014 till I think 2019 was when the last article was. And I love the title because I actually wrote an article back in the day. It was after the content Emmys, if people remember that. It was called Content Minded. And I don't like the mindset stuff. I wanted to differentiate a little bit. But I did that. And I think it's a good name. It's a decent name for a podcast, something that's jumpy and catchy. I think it's the way Break the Rules has somewhat of like that. Like if you can have an accurate acronym like BTR. But I noticed that as BTR drifts towards I don't know what, I don't have control over the direction. I noticed that the original sort of ethos of like interviewing weird Twitter schizos on the make. I wanted to do that. I think there's a lot of interesting people on Twitter and elsewhere that I feel I can interview and that will be good content. And the first one will be King Salmonfish. And I hopefully, when I do this still life painting, that will be the banner image. Hopefully next week I can launch it and I can make it regular, at least maybe not every week, but every 2 weeks. I also have would you ever box a Twitter user you don't like? I know who you're implying, and I know what you're implying. So apparently, Andy Worski is going to box the Gunt, and apparently Boogie's involved and Sam Hyde is involved. I don't know who Sam Hyde is boxing. Culture War Criminal, challenged Beardsoy. So that would be interesting. I hope Fuentes gets to block someone. I think I was a bit too late on Fuentes um, last week. People said that I got some chronology wrong. Some Jim Janney, some Mr. Medicare Janney said that I got some things wrong. I'm an idiot that I don't know anything. And he's a nihilist. That's a Sargon talking point. Well, I mean, I think he said multiple occasions that he doesn't believe in anything. Not that he doesn't believe in anything, but he doesn't care enough to believe in things. But no, I think I was a bit too late on Fuentes. I don't know. I don't want to be bothered. It's the same thing with certain other people. I don't want to be bothered with having their fan base come after me. I don't operate like that. I think like um the more I think about it, it's like in terms of actual ideology, it's kind of hard to pinpoint because Nick is an amalgamation of like a few different, like very transparent influences. And I think like the more he strays into like absolutely like R-worded internet drama and like meme shelling points, like I think he was arguing, like I think Beardson and Kai last night were arguing about, I don't know, some stupid like you know real think solvable, like it's just internet stuff nobody cares about. But I think like in terms of core ideas, I do think that he capitalized on something that was needed at the time, which I think like is not even original to Nick Fuentes. It really was a sort of like, I wouldn't say George Lincoln Rock. I wouldn't besmirch the name of George Lincoln Rockwell. Not that I'm, a supporter or anything, but I think that trying to like graft racialist politics onto the American project, I think like if someone did it in a more tactful way, it could have worked. But the problem is that um another thing I point out, what is my core critique of Flint? Well, I mean, yeah, I don't have a really serious core. Well, I mean, my core critique is that the problem with America First is that they have to contend with American history and developments in American history that have led up to the present moment. And also a lot of people, mostly on like the original stock American Protestant side of of the right wing in America, they're very resentful of like any sort of Catholic Castiza Guadalupe integralism. But I sympathize a bit more with the thesis that and we will see this when we are going to read today Jean Baudrillard's America. I sympathize a bit more with the critique that America has hit a terminal point where we cannot go back. And well, actually, metaphysics. I am content minded. Will largely also be about internet history. But anyways, I think that Fuentes, he's his own worst enemy, and I've been reading some of his tweets on his new account. I mean, he's on his 50th burner account, and I think like ironically enough, Destiny of all people had a good critique, even though Destiny he has to like starfuck himself. And he's like, well, I'm, the big guy that Nick needs friends. And like, but I think that his critique that Nick was too young and he let people sort of like guide him by the tethers. And he maybe, if he was a few years older, would have been a bit more tactful with certain things. I mean, I think the problem is when you do have an ego complex, it's very hard to be a leader of the movement. Even if, like, you have to have a sort of magnanimity and an ego about you. But when it comes to being petty and vindictive, I mean, this is why I think, I don't know, you like, but then at the same time, you have to also be like sort of a personality where you're a cult onto yourself. And I think that, it's funny. My friend Catherine was talking about this with Justin Murphy about like certain personalities basically creating internet cults of themselves. And I think that you have to really have that type of personality, but you can't have it to the point where um, you are mistaking loyalty to people as being loyal to people who are fundamentally detrimental and only being loyal to them because they're very easy to control and they're lol cows, and you find some sort of humor in it. So anyways, I think that he's gun carding for Ethan Ralph, nothing to say it's over. I don't know why. I think maybe because he has this power over Zoomers in particular. I just don't understand it. But what do I know? I'm some fat ass millennial, so I will never understand. Um, but I think that no, my analysis I think was fair towards Nick Fuentes, even though I think that he's not the best representation of the right wing in North America. Um, but I mean, Ethan Ralph to me is a hideous ghoul and evil, fundamentally evil, is a terrible and evil person. And I don't know why anyone would tolerate someone like Ethan Ralph. And even like what Worski and PvP are doing, I think is at a certain point, I think you can't really it's fun to spiral a lol cow. It's fun to tip the cow. It's very fun to milk the Jule. But at a certain point, I think that memeing on someone and making bank off of a lol cow. It's the same with Chris Chan, by the way. After a while, you have to sort of seriously think over the implications of like, okay, what is the content I am putting out into the world? Because the thing is, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm very entertained by internet drama. I have, let the veil slip a bit with how much I enjoy it. But I think that when it comes to actually putting something out there into the world, and this is why I wanted to start Content Minded podcast, because I feel like a lot of people and a lot of ideas have become neglected. And like I say, I really don't like BTR is Lev's vision, and we all know that. And I think that if I could find a way to because their thing is there's never enough podcasts to start, of course. Podcasting will never die. At least I hope it doesn't. Because I don't really see anything in the future that can replace it. But anyways, my point being is that you can tip cows all day, but I think someone like Ethan Ralph should face serious legal consequences for the actions that he's done over the years. And after a certain point, it is hilarious, and it's like, yeah, I watch, Casino and all that, but I think it's like after a while, it just becomes sad in a way. Um, it's like watching the newer episodes of of Geno Samuel's Chris Chan documentary when he's begging some random troll crying on the floor, begging for his fictional GF, by underage fictional GF, by the way. Rosachu iteration, begging on the floor, crying, and it's just really because they say that they're abusing this fictional in the other dimension. It's just really sad. It's like it's unwatchable after a point. It's not unwatchable. It's watchable because Gino is a great documentarian, but the inherent nature of the content of Christine whatever it's very disturbing. And I a lot of people, they criticized our episode, and I do think that maybe if it was just me, Lev, Gino, and Default, or me, Lev, and Gino, and Billy, like it was, I think like that's unfortunate. It's something we learned in the early days of BTR. Too many chefs is kind of like in the kitchen, kind of muddles things, and people, and usual people because they just want Gino to talk. Of course, like this is the problem I think with every time, and I know it's like just the nature of the beast, but if I can have my own personal egoism for a point, it is kind of frustrating when you're doing a podcast that it's not like a typical like interview, like I don't know, Lex Friedman is like the archetype of this, where it's like just the guest and people just their fans come in. It's like we're more than that, I think, or I am more than that, or whatever. I don't even know if there's a we, but you get what I mean. Like, it's frustrating when people are like, I just came here, Junior. I don't care about what you think. It's like, bro, like, I don't know. Or I like every time there's a bigger guest, it's like, yeah, there's always that ego thought in the back of your head that, I have an opinion and I'm conversing with someone, and it's not like some, like, Lex Friedman interview show. So it's always frustrating to see those comments like, you didn't let Gino talk. It's like, well, there was points where I could see like I was trying to moderate. And some people did acknowledge that. And I think that it is the problem when you do have a larger panel. Because I think, like, if it's just a matter of 12 schizos from Twitter screaming at each other, like that, like there was something magical about that. But when you start to like get a panel show where you have like serious guests, then not to say that they're not serious like the people that we used to get, but like, you know what I mean? Like when you have bigger guests, um, I think like even that, what's that other show that's kind of like BTR, politically provoked or politically provoked. Um, like it's always going to be frustrating when you do have a large number of people. But anyway, so another thing before we get to Jean Baudrillard's America is the Vanity Fair article that I am so eternally steamed. Listen, if Peter Thiel, if you're watching this, please, my friend, give me a stipend, give me a flat in either Florida or Texas, or even, I mean, even a northern, because I really don't like the heat. So a northern, province, a northern state that's based. Please, Peter Thiel, give me money to get me out of here. I will renounce my citizenship because apparently the Canadian government is going to not let me leave because of a private medical decision that I can't say on YouTube. Apparently, the Canadian government's not going to let me leave for another 3 years. Does that make sense to you? Is that, and then in all the ghouls of the CBC, well, it helped save lives. No, it didn't. It didn't help. Listen, my hot take is that the people that were going to get clipped were going to get clipped, and it didn't help a single thing. Okay, that you all know that it's my opinion, and that's verifiably true. If they put out the real data on the you know what, so this is a matter of religiosity, and I am my beliefs are apocryphal to the religiosity of the Canadian experiment because it's not a government, it's not a legitimate country. It is a petri dish. It is a neoliberal petri dish, and I feel that my time in this place, as sad as it is, I find it by the day intolerable. But I think I need to find ways. This is why I think I also started my own. I'm going to start my own podcast because I mean, I have my YouTube videos and I will produce more YouTube videos. I will produce more art videos. But I feel like I'm growing increasingly frustrated with living in this country. And many people have said that I'm spiritually American, anyways. So, but we will see today how America is a fiction. Anyway, um, move to Maine. I heard Maine is pretty based. I would probably move. So I feel like yeah, I'm being frustrated. But anyways, the Vanity Fair article, um if they put Zach Zurko, I think that's how you pronounce it. They put out real data and people minds would melt. Everything about the Chinese delicacy was one big scan after the next. There was this I put it on my Telegram. If you go to my Telegram, by the way, smash that like button, go to the Telegram. Uh all my spicier rants. Well, here's the thing, Philip. I was going to take that particular brand of the sacrament, but I think it's the principle of the thing now. And now that I've had it at least twice. The Chinese delicacy. I think. I mean, I don't know. There is this crazy like a lot of these MDs, these fake quote unquote experts on Twitter. They have to scaremonger, and they're saying stuff that basically everyone is going to have the immune system of a grids patient, and we're going to get sick, multiple times a year, and it's going to be over for us, and people are going to die by the age of 50. Like, some ridiculous stuff, really. I mean, it's just anyways, I have this thing I'm going to participate in. I wrote this paper. It's called the live stream. It's a like an online conference. It's called Society Must Be Inoculated. And I write about various artworks during the last 2 years of the global Chinese delicacy. And I think it's in around May 23rd or so. So that's exciting. But anyways, next week, content minded podcast. Smash the like button right here for the YouTube algorithm. Absolutely felt the like button. Give a a northern lariat to the like button. 90s Kenta Kobashi style. So anyways, the Vanity Fair article. Now, people have been going crazy. One person in particular has been going crazy, but I don't want to mention his name because I'm still cool with him. But I feel that the Vanity Fair article, it at least somewhat accomplished its job in the sense that it's a culmination of thinking among like left irony cells, among the Chapotists, where everyone who is quote unquote of the post left, that there's this red brown alliance and that they're all funded by Peter Thiel. And like, Peter Thiel, give me money, please. I beg of you. Give me money, Peter Thiel. Like BAP says, what's the problem? Like, here's the thing. If a millionaire wanted to come by and fund us, but they didn't fundamentally change our message, every single political movement throughout human history had patronage, right? Like, again, this is the problem. I think, again, this came up with Daddy Jim, right? Is that this is very much an older miasma of the internet where it's like, oh, you can't take any money that's e-begging. Like, everyone is an e-beggar. Everyone takes money. Well, not us, though. I mean, in general, throughout human history, every political movement takes money. So I don't see the problem with some based millionaire giving us a few shekels, giving us a few mammons, if they're not going to change our message in any fundamental way. Like, this is just stupid. But the people that are on the quote unquote post left, that were mentioned in the article, I understand why they don't want to be associated with the right wing. But it's just like they by spurging out about it, the article has done its job, which is to put a wedge between an alliance of dissidents, either on the left or right. Now, in some ways, this alliance is impossible for a number of reasons, and I still think that you should treat the post left with a grain of salt, whatever that means. But I think that as time goes on, it's clear that if you have a huge negative reaction to this Vanity Fair article, then it's not going to work out. And it's really the journalist laptop class, the verminoids on the verminoid heap. They've done their job because they've essentially put a message out there. They've put a meme out there that Peter Thiel is behind everything. And you're basically essentially you're playing that kayfabe in a way. Not to name names, but you're playing that kayfabe by freaking out about it. Because the thing is, like, these things come and go. Unfortunately, by being profiled in a legitimate publication, even though these people, their legitimacy has faded, to say the least, it can still have consequences. It's kind of like how Blockhead Joe basically orchestrated through his articles the cancellation of a Sam Hyde and world peace. So there still is real consequences. James Pogue on Wetbrain was interesting. I've listened to the Wetbrain. I've listened to the interview. I believe Honor Levy follows me, but unfortunately she has a BF, so it's not going to work. But no, Wetbrain is interesting. I listened to the Justin Murphy podcast with them. I mean, they're all over the place. But the thing is, I'm not into the whole like Urbic crypto thing. I'm not like a crypto person, but they do have very interesting stuff. So I probably will listen if you recommended that, I will listen to it. But anyways, the Vanity Fair article, I think like if people just cool down, and for example, my good friend Alex Kashuta, who my second appearance on, Subversive is coming out soon, I believe. My friend Alex Kashuta, she didn't freak out about it. Like she's like, yeah, whatever, Like if but I do understand, like, if you were directly named in the article and you didn't take any funding, I understand because that is slander. But I don't know. I just feel that it's a very easy sticking point to be like, oh, well, you're all funded by Peter Thiel. Like it's just a way of it's kind of like the political right, which I mean, there is more evidence to suggest that a lot of progressive projects are funded by George Soros, but like, he's early into the direction, but may in the downtown New York right, it's very shallow. Yes, the downtown New York avant-garde must be conquered by people. I think that's why I should move to New York. I must conquer these people like a noble step warrior. And being an artist myself, I could probably do some good work. I could do some good damage to the New York, art scene. Yeah, I don't know. That's a fantasy, but you know what I mean. Geo, you can easily acquire Goth GF if even Wings of Redemption's managed. Yeah, but but the thing is, like, Wings of Redemption, it is something that he managed to get married, but it's again another thing where, like, it is like with Wings in particular. I think like tipping lol cows like that, it's sad. It's sad. Anyways, so the Vanity Fair article, some people were saying that it was fair, it was a fair assessment, but even though like textually, in terms of the actual text, it was a fair assessment. It wasn't like an old like Gamergate style BuzzFeed. Oh my god, these people are evil. But I do think that the purpose of it was subversive, right? And yes, they by reacting to it, then they've achieved their mission. Anyways, let's get on to the main topic because I do have a hard cutoff around 12:30 or so. But Jean Baudrillard's America. I'm writing a book. Sorry, well, I am writing kind of a book, but like I'm writing an article that hopefully will get into IM 1776 about the conflict between the West and the Eurasian idea. It's going to be called Between Moscow and Washington. And for it, I'm reading Jean Baudrillard's America again. There's some passages he makes that I feel is pertinent. So, anyways, I'm used to the reading from the text and lecture style. My mentor in university, who is my master's supervisor, he was very much old school, like reading from the text and lecturing from it off the cuff, no notes, just reading passages, getting the major ideas. But before we go on, smash that like button. Donate if you must. My PayPal.me link is there. Give me a few shekels. I probably will come out with a Ko-Fi soon. I'm trying to go back to working on my seller's website so you can buy my artwork directly. I need to make money. Please. I'm tired of this. It's been years, okay, that I've been giving. The thing is, I feel bad for paywalling content. I much rather, I think I will paywall if I do end up writing a book either on the political right or something. I probably will paywall content for a month, like on Substack, and then I will release it periodically. I just feel very bad paywalling content because it's always, and I talked about this with Alex Kashuta recently about like, you want the ideas to get out because you feel that they're important, but then to ask for money for them, it's very frustrating to find something you like and it's paywalled. So yeah, but I have to make money, like as people know, for all of my time and effort on BTR. I'm not going to get into it. Anyways, John Baudrillard's America. There is this one other video on YouTube about it, but it really is from one of these philosophy channel theory cells, and it's very dry. But Geo in grift mode. Just kidding. It's okay to make money, bro. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, no name. Geo, where to start with Baudrillard? Simulacra and simulation is always the golden standard, but I do think that some of his other lesser known works, like like the Vital Illusion, Baudrillard, like the Desert of the Real, Baudrillard, but the golden standard is of course simulacra and simulation. But America is the sort of culmination of a lot of his ideas throughout his body of work, because it's when, I believe in the 1980s, he traveled to America on a lecture tour, I think, and then he wrote a travel log about his experiences in the desert and so forth. And America really is, in my opinion, we will see the culmination of a lot of his writing, because America is the actualization of a lot of his ideas. Because America is from its people, as he says, to its landscape, to everything, is a fictional nation. It is infused with fiction being. So we will get into that. But before, please smash the like, go to my Telegram, go to my Twitter. I saw that Sam Hyde recently, unfortunately, got banned from Twitter. Yeah, I believe he hurled some gamer words at some journalist, some F slurs. That was pretty based. But unfortunately, his account got nuked. He paid money for that actual name, Wigger. Um, unfortunately. So RIP to Sam Hyde's account. I mean, he'll probably come back. Everyone comes back eventually. I hope that all of the OG frogs come back. I hope Hesperic, Menoquion 4, Melch, I hope they all come back one day. Anyways, so I think I'm going to read just some pertinent passages, but the book opens up with basically the chapter is called Vanishing Point. So let me go to it. And like he has like illustrations throughout, like this is of the typical American cowboy. And Sam Hyder came back. Oh, I knew it. Sam Hyder came back. That's pretty cool. Um, let's see. So Vanishing Point. Nostalgia born of the immediate Texas hills and the Sierras of New Mexico, gliding down the freeway, smash hits on the Chrysler stereo. Heat wave. Snapshots aren't enough. We need the whole film of the trip in real time, including the unbearable heat in the music. We'd have to replay it from end to end at home in a darkened room, rediscovering the magic of the freeway in the distance and the ice cold alcohol in the desert and the speed and live it again in the video at home in real time, not simply for the pleasure of remembering, because the fascination of senseless repetition is already present in the abstraction of the journey. The unfolding of the desert is infinitely close to the timelessness of film. So, from the very beginning, Baudrillard posits that you have the relation of America to its landscape and its desert as being an open space, but an open space that has become fictionalized. And so, at the very end, when he says, already you can sort of preempt his thinking here when he talks about the desert is infinitely close to the timelessness of film. So America, from its almost from its roots, was the perfect landscape for film, and the sort of senselessness of hedonic pursuits, the sort of senselessness of driving, because Baudrillard talks about how speed is the only metric of the American experiment as it currently is. Speed is everything. The speed of commerce, the speed of industry, the speed of infotainment. Um, Speed becomes the experiential whole that holds together various American experiences. So Baudrillard is doing the classic American road trip thing where he's gunning it down the highway. And there's sort of like a limit experience within the speed and the sort of nonsensical nature of doing a road trip. It seems that it never goes anywhere. So for example, who is one of the greatest American artists of all time? Who embodied that particular post-war vision of the American century? You could arguably say it was Jackson Pollock, right? Because he represented the chaotic unconscious of America. But how did Jackson Pollock die? He would get plastered drunk, get into his oh, Thomas Kincaid. Oh my god. Well, Thomas Kincaid represents another form of America. Um, but he got plastered drunk, would get into his vehicle, go at immense speeds, was trying to achieve a limit experience. But that was his end when he he beamed a tree. And some people say it was him trying to anhero, but really it was living at the very edge. Now Andy Warhol came about, and Kerouac, and Hopper, they represent different forms of America. But in terms of the sort of unconscious of the modern American mind, the modern post-war American mind, I would argue that Jackson Pollock is of immense significance. So then he talks about New York and Sacramento and so forth. And then let me go to a pertinent quote. So speed creates pure objects. It is itself a pure object, since it cancels out the ground and territorial reference points, since it runs ahead of time to annul time itself. Since it moves more quickly than its own cause and obliterates that cause by overstripping it, speed is the triumph of effect over cause, the triumph of instantaneity over time as depth. Because remember, he alludes to Europe a lot. Europe in the old world is time as depth and reference point, because Europe is cluttered with the centuries of reference points, of symbols, of architecture. But in the American experience, I know that it's sort of like, for those who are familiar with the Turner thesis and the closing of the frontier, America always laments the closing of the frontier, the closing of the expansion, and in a way, a modern equivalent would be the closing of Route 66, because he became his own painting with trees and cars. Oh God. Oh, that's brutal. That's terrible. That's terrible, Schizo Ricardo. But anyways, so America laments the closing of the frontier. And in a way, the closing of Route 66 is the closing of that older picture of Americana as, post-war middle class working people going on road trips and cutting right across the heartland, and all having all of those little intricacies, all of those little, like, American Gothic niches that you'd find that was very like you know southwestern, or like, the desert, what do they call that? Not Midwest, but Southeast, I think. I forget what it's called. The sort of like, the Arizonas, the flatlands, and finding like these little cultural baubles on the highway, and these like tourist traps and these little niches, all of which have become abandoned. Now they are the playgrounds for urbex explorers, urban exploration. But America represented that speed, because when you go down the highway, all of the sort of things, they melt into speed. You can't visually see you can visually see them, but they redshift, they go in the background. And so that is what Baudrillard is saying. Because when you go for a road trip in Europe, it's different, because everything is developed, everything has the markings and lesions of history, but America is a land without history. It is a land of pure fictional mythopoetics. Even the people, Baudrillard says, are fictional. So it is annulled by speed. Speed is the triumph of effect over cause. The triumph of instantiaty over time is depth. The triumph of the surface and pure objectivity over the profundity of desire. Because everything is pure surface in America. Everything. Even desire itself is pure surface level. It is the fabulation of desire. It is not the deep longing, like if you were to see European, like French New Line cinema or whatever, or literature, ancient literature. It's more of the sort of surface appearances that instantiate the whole. Its only rule is to leave no trace behind. Triumph of forgetting over memory. An uncultivated, amnesic intoxication. The superfluity and reversibility of a pure object is the pure geometry of the desert. Driving like this produces a kind of invisibility, transparency of transversality in things simply by emptying them out. It is a sort of slow motion, I can't say the word, anhero. Death by the externation of forms, the delectable form of their disappearance. So again, if you were to read Virilio, he talks about America in the book The Aesthetics of Disappearance, where speed itself disappears all landscapes. So for example, a concrete example would be there was this documentary um about the town, the infamous post-industrial town, what's it called, Gary, Indiana. Look up Gary, Indiana after this stream on YouTube, after the stream, of course. And it talks about this one sociologist described America as a throwaway society because the industry will flow one way, the resources will flow one way, and then people will follow. Like kind of like the gold rush, kind of like the frontier. After the gold rush ended, the frontier was closed because then it was colonized. There was no more wild nature. So there is no linear time. There's just surface. There's just speed. So then one town gets propped up. Then they move on. They discard the old. America is a throwaway society, which is a very apt description. The West is the inverse of the Northern Puritan cynicism. Yeah, that's true. Um, and Hero by Storm King, 10 out of 10. Yes, I hope Storm King comes back. He was a good friend of mine. The Puritan thing is also like, I think Baudrillard, he talks about the Puritan thing very soon. So we will get to that. So this is page 7. Have you seen the Academic Agent Academic Agent talking about Andy Warhol? I should watch that one actually. Again, I'd like to talk to Academic Agent one day. Still, there's a violent contrast here in the country between the growing abstractness of a nuclear universe and a primary, visceral, unbounded vitality, springing not from rootedness, but from the lack of roots. A metabolic vitality in sex and bodies, as well as in the work and in buying and selling, deep down the US with its space, its technological refinement, its bluff good conscience, even in those spaces which it opens up for the simulation, is the only remaining primitive society. Wow, that is amazing. Meaning that America embodies the sort of primitive nomadology of the sort of nomad where nothing is held back. There is really no like there's history, there's a mythology of American history, but compared to the old world in Europe, America really is like this vitalistic primitivist society filled with tribes, filled with spectacles. The land is open. There is very few striated spaces. But unfortunately, I think that this analysis is sort of not very it's current in a way, and there still is this vitalistic spirit within America. But Paul Talk Mary Church. Oh my god, can you imagine if Paul Talk he talked about Mary Church, but apparently Paul Talk is back on Twitter. So, anyways, Baudrillard is saying that America is this last primitive society, because America worships the pure vitality of the surface, of free space, of the destruction of all norms in history. The fascinating thing is that to travel through to travel through it were the primitive society of the future, a society of complexity, hybridity, and the greatest intermingling of the ritualism that is ferocious, but whose superficial diversity lends its beauty. A society inhabited by a total metasocial fact with unforeseeable consequences, whose imminence is breathtaking, yet lacking a past through which to reflect on this, and therefore fundamentally primitive. So American rootlessness devolves into tribal primitivism. So in some ways, you could say that Baudrillard, in a weird way, um, preempted the sort of favelaization or third worldization of America. And I would say that Canada is an even worse example because we really don't have any collective identity to speak of, except for biosecurity hysteria. It seems that bare life has been holding um, the average shitlib boomer old in Canada, but that's another issue. That's another stream. Its primitivism has passed into hyperbolic, inhuman character of a universe that is beyond us, that far outstrips its own moral, social, or ecological rationale. And then Baudrillard says some things like when he sees a surfer on the beach, when he sees a car going down the highway, that this is apocalyptic. America sheds its own morale. America sheds its own identity. America sheds its very own frontier and ecology. This is apocalyptic. It is apocalyptic nomadism that Baudrillard sees within the modern American experiment. So only Puritans, so someone mentioned Puritan cynicism, only Puritans could have invented and developed this ecological and biological morality based on preservation and therefore on discrimination, which is profoundly racial in nature. Everything becomes an overprotected nature reserve. So protected indeed that there is talk today of denaturalizing Yosemite to give it back to nature, as it happened with the Tassidae in the Philippines. A Puritan obsession with the origins in the very place where the ground itself has already gone. An obsession which finds a niche, a contact precisely on the point where everything unfolds in an astral indifference. Um, so there's a sort of miracle in the insipidity of artificial paradises. So, in other words, because things have become uh, consumed by American speed, by American technicity and technology, and sort of the spectacle machine of Hollywood, because America is so much of a fiction being that sort of lacks its own history, the Puritan spirit within America has to preserve a sort of artifice, a sort of artificial nature of preservation of something that is sacred. So, like the American transcendentalists did this. Um, the geography of America itself becomes preserved. Is that academic age in the chat? Is that? Oh my God. I'm glad that geography and highway infrastructure came into this. Americanism is seen as most clearly in the automobile design predicated in 72 with the diffuse metallography necessitated big straight roads. Yes, exactly. Whereas in America, big straight roads can only be possible as opposed to Europe. The automobile design of European cars are optimized for tighter metallographer curvier roads, the suspensions, rear engine placement, and much more of this from the European design comes from this. Well, that's very funny how even within the design of the car itself, America embodies this new sort of experiential nomadology where there is only smooth space. So, is that actually academic agent? That'd be great. Thank you, my friend, for coming by. Um, so I'm going to read from the later in the book where he talks about the American experiment itself. Um, oh, it's not academic agent. I'm sorry. I wish academic. Oh, I was. You caught cloud. You caught geo cloud chasing there. I'm very sorry. Anyways, therefore, it's a sort of miracle in the insipidity of artificial paradises, so long as they achieve the greatness of entire unculture. He puts un in brackets. Um, in the cities too, even for residential, huge wide roads. So even though if that's not academic agent, that still is a great point though. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, fake AA. In America, space lends a sense of grandeur, even to the insipidity of the suburbs and the funky towns. The desert is everywhere in America, preserving insignificance. A desert where the miracle of the car of ice and whiskey is daily reenacted. A marvel of easy living mixed with the fatality of the desert. So in America, you have excess, you have danger, but the desert is everywhere. That sort of primitivistic vitalism, that worship of speed is everywhere in America. But the downside is that America becomes a cultural desert where only the surface, the deadland, the wasteland, headpiece filled with straw, you know, the T.S. Eliot poem, the wasteland becomes the main playground, the main geographic signifier of America. That is the downside of it. We follow each other on Twitter, by the way, subject. I will try to bring D on. I'm going to watch his interview with Lambda he did about aesthetics. But I think, for the content minded podcast, D would be a great guest. So then he says, the fatality of the desert, a miracle of obscenity that is genuinely American, a miracle of total availability of everything, of the transparency of all functions in space. Through the latter, nevertheless, remains unfathomable in its vastness and can only be exercised by speed. The Italian miracle, that of stage and scene, the American miracle, that of obscene, the profusion of sense, as against the deserts of meaninglessness. So America is obscenity in its pure form. It is profanation. What is profanation? Profanation is taking something that is sacred or high-minded, something that for a reason, and this is according to Giorgio Agamben, if you read his book Profanations, the profane and the obscene are something that takes a higher concept and lowers it into use by commoners, right? So that is what the American experiment as obscenity is. Because in America, according to Baudrillard, everything becomes available, nothing is sacred, everything is for use because everything is upon a transparent desert. There are very few hidden spaces in America, and the hidden spaces that are there are terrifying. I don't need to get into the Freemasonic roots of America to know what I'm referring to. Um, because even the act of hiddenness in America becomes a part of the spectacle. Even the conspiracy theorist, even the Q boomer, even the person who plunges the depths of hiddenness within America, they too become another identity frame that becomes bought and sold. They too are a part of the spectacle in America, where everything is the desert, everything is a free space to buy and sell like a Bedouin nomad, like the Great Caravan. America is a never ending great caravan of consumer goods on the desert. Baudrillard in The Matrix, he said it confuses the two topics of illusion with simulation. His hyperreal is defined as making it impossible to separate the real from illusion. Yes, The Matrix, according to Sam Chris, is the concretization of what Baudrillard meant. That's why Baudrillard hated it, because it literally renders into concrete form the sort of oh well, we're all in a big machine and we're human batteries, man. It's like, no, that's not what Baudrillard meant. Existence is a much better representation because existence is a biological being that grafts into the neurological and the psychic that creates this distinction between what is real and what is not. In the Matrix, it's a total cliche, it's a total pastiche. That is why Baudrillard did the worst, most cutting Giga Chad own to the Wachowskis ever. The biggest, what in Italian we call a botta, where it's like kind of like a backhanded insult. Baudrillard said that the Wachowski sisters sisters, said that The Matrix is a movie the Matrix would have made. Oh boy. There you go. The Matrix is a concrete form of a Baudrillard. It's very much like a baby's first, postmodern philosophy ideal. And there's really very little. I remember I was listening to I forget what stream it was. I believe it was a video from either Justin Murphy or it may have been Endeavor. I forget what stream it was. It says that The Matrix is very little philosophic content, despite those films about, the philosophy of the Matrix, the book, The Philosophy of the Matrix, how then the sequels, they're full of like, Tantra and Hindu philosophy. It's like, that's all crap. That's crap. Existence is actually a deeply rich philosophic film compared to The Matrix. And of course, the reboot of The Matrix is itself a postmodern inversion of its own corpus by saying it's a video game. And there's this one part where the characters are critiquing themselves, where this one Ramona Flowers girl boss is like this game designer is like, what if it's about the patriarchy? What if it's about this? What if it's about late capitalism? Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like that the new film is just the new Matrix really ruined it. It really is transparent, and it really goes to show that the identity matrix, identity matrix, the identity complex of the Wachowskis really shines through in that one. And really, can you trust them as directors for every Janny of a certain T variety, they say that, well, I'm a cybernetic being. I am the cyborg by taking these funny pills. It's like, you know what I mean. Anyways, I don't. I have to YouTube OPSEC, ladies and gentlemen. YouTube OPSEC. So there's this other part that I'm writing this article. It's a long, like 15 to 20 pager. It's going to be called Between Washington and Moscow. This is the part that I was reading for it. So this is near the end. Here we go. So everything, where is it? Let me find it. Please like, share, subscribe, smash that like button. When I speak of the American way of life, I do so to emphasize its utopian nature, its mythic banality. You're gonna get some real like Horkheimer and Adorno stuff right here. This real like dialectic enlightenment stuff. Colin Lorenzo, stay handsome, Gio. Thank you, my friend. But I am a cyborg by free bracing trend. Well, I guess that a Giga Chad is a form of a cybernetic being in a way. The meme of Giga Chad. Cyber master of swag bag of chip in the intended addresses. Please inform. What the hell? What are you on about? You're a great day. You were not filtered by the way speaking the site and the fact you have received the intended recipients, and I will not make any chan. Whoa, we have a cybernetic being in the chat. Anyways, when speaking of America's way of life, I do so to emphasize its utopian nature, its mythic banality, its dream quality, its grandeur. That philosophy, which is eminent not only to its technological development, but also in the exceeding of technology and its own excessive play, not only in modernity, but the extravagance of modern forms, whether it be the vertical network of New York or the horizontal one of Los Angeles, not only in banality, but in the apocalyptic form of banality, not only in the reality of everyday life, but in the hyper reality of which, the hyperreality of that life, which, as it is, displays all the characteristics of fiction. So the sort of banality of the American culture industry has turned all of American life into a fiction, into fiction being, because through which Americans realize themselves through their own fiction being. Unlike Europe, which he says later on in the page, Europe has the weight of history behind it. America is a land without history, therefore, fiction takes its place. Cybernetic being in the chat. Um, the OPSEC language makes it funnier. Well, thank you, my friend. That's true. Like on Twitter, I have this like weird Creole on Twitter of OPSEC language. Um, he is not wrong, but it's in defense of its Hollywood movie and not an existential philosophy dissertation. Yeah, yeah. D just did a stream on the Wasteland. Yeah, the Wasteland. My favorite poem by Eliot is The Hollowed Men. And I have this idea for a painting actually of the Hollowed Men, where it's that that one line where they say that these beings are huddled for warmth on the edge of the Tumid River. I just love that scene of the apocalypse. I might do a painting of that. Um, so fiction is not imagination. It is the fictional character which is so exciting. Fiction is not imagination. This is quite opposite to our own natural tendency, which is to anticipate reality by imagining it, or to flee from it by idealizing it. This is why we shall never inhabit true fiction. We are condemned to the imaginary and to nostalgia for the future. Nostalgia for the future. Because in America, why do you think we love cyberpunk? Why do you think we love the Y2K? Why do you think we millennials love liminal spaces? Because it is a nostalgia for a future that never was. American futurism is in some ways a nostalgia, a preempting of its own failures, its own hauntology, a presence that haunts its own, a being that haunts the present with visions of the future from the past. That is what America produces. Why do you think that liminal space compilations you can find on Reddit, on YouTube, why do you think that they're largely informed by having a millennial North American childhood? Why do you think the liminal space comforts us, especially in a time of increased alienation? Because they are a before land. They are on the cusp of the edge of history, the end of history, on its very edge. It is when the American project reached its apotheosis. And now the liminal space represents the emptiness, the banality that Baudrillard was talking about. Because it's very hard to have liminal spaces in Europe. Because European buildings, European geography is informed by its history. America, North America isn't. America is the land, the wasteland of the liminal space, post-industrial America. And now all of life becomes a non-place, especially here in Canada. I hate to say it. So he's saying that in America, unlike the imaginary being a form of escapism or idealization, the American way of life is spontaneously fictional, since it is transcending of the imaginary in reality. The imaginary becomes the real. Now, when it comes to politics, we'll see on the page over, very hard hitting red pills and black pills from Baudrillard on the next page, but let's get to it. Fiction is not abstraction either. And if America suffers from a kind of infirmity when it comes to abstraction, that incapacity takes on the glory all on its own in the sprawling reality of middle America, in the apotheosis of daily life, in the empirical genuine which so amazes us. Perhaps the successful revolution is no longer successful in the way Tocqueville understood it, as a spontaneous movement of the public mind, a form of spontaneous concrete ordering of mores to modern life. It is not so much in the operation of institutions and the freeing of technologies and images from the glorious form of American reality to be found. So fiction is not something that is fake in a sense. Fiction is an autopoiesis. Fiction is a spontaneous generative force in America that creates identity. Um, in the future, midism will be a major cult. Well, King Salmon Fish, midism already is a cult. Also, Baudrillard has this hot take on anorexia that I could probably get to as well. But he's saying that so Tocqueville understood the American Revolution as a grassroots, spontaneous uprising that was unique to the American experiment, to the Puritan yeoman farmer ideal of America. But here he's saying that the political project where American Puritans created their own society of mores and morality and ethics, that is gone. Now, spontaneous being in America is informed by fiction. So he says then, in the immortal dynamic of images, in the orgy of goods and services, an orgy of power and useless energy, yet who can say where useful energy ends, in which the spirit of advertising and more to the fore than Tocqueville's public spirit. But these are, after all the markings of liberation. The very obscenity of this society is a sign of its liberation, a liberation of all affects, a liberation of energy. At the very obscenity of this society is the sign of its liberation, some of them perfectly excessive and abject. But this is precisely the point, the high point of liberation. Its logical outcome is to be found in the spectacular orgy, speed, the instantaneity of change, the generalized eccentricity. Politics frees itself in the spectacle. In the all out advertising effect, sexuality frees itself in all of its anomalies and perversions, including the refusal of sexuality. Hello, the incel? The latest fad, which itself is only supercooling effect of sexual liberation. So all of the critiques of sexual liberation, how the sexual revolution produced the incel. Baudrillard was talking about the 80s like radical feminists who were refusing their own sexuality, but he preempts the incel in American life as part of the spectacle. Language frees themselves in the ever quickening round of fashion. More customs, the body and language frees itself. The liberated man is not one who is freed in his ideal reality, his inner truth. Liberated man is not the one who is freed of his ideal. His inner truth, his inner truth, or his transparency. He is the man who changes spaces, who circulates, who changes sex, clothing, and habits according to fashion, rather than morality, and who changes opinions not as his conscience dictates, but rather on opinion polls. But in response to opinion polls, this is practical liberation, whether we like it or not. Whether or not we deplore its wastefulness and its obscenity. Moreover, people in totalitarian countries know very well that this is true freedom and dreams of nothing but for fashion, the latest styles, idols, the play of images, travel for its own sake, advertising, the deluge of advertising, in short, the orgy. Now you have to admit that the America, which has concretely, technologically achieved this orgy of liberation, this orgy of indifference, disconnection, rootlessness, exhibition, and circulation. I do not know what remains of the successful revolution Tocqueville speaks of, the revolution of political freedom and of the quality of public spirit, but it has certainly achieved this revolution, the revolution of the orgy. So Baudrillard is saying something very profound there about America. Baudrillard is saying that America is informed by its own sense of speed, its own sense of eccentricity, where everything is energy. It's very much like George Bataille, where late capitalism, relies heavily on excess and waste and the expenditures of waste. Whew, let me calm down a little bit here. A liberation of all affects, some of them perfectly excessive and abject. So, what is objection, right? What is objection? Objection is an alienation from the self and from the other. Objection is is contrary to the normative. Objection is that sense of sort of like rootlessness and alienation and hideousness. Abjected being is monstrous. But America celebrates abjection. It celebrates liberation in pure form. Because the only way to guarantee what Baudrillard calls the orgy, which is the inhibition of all affects, of all pleasures, of all media, where nothing is sacred. The only way this can come about is through the technological and historyless sociological geography of America. America is unique to what Baudrillard calls the orgy, the sort of post-Fordist, post-sexual revolution society. But Baudrillard is saying that the older model of American liberalism that was expressed in Tocqueville about political freedom, about the yeoman farmer that you find in Jefferson, the ideals of the Federalist Papers, that this America did not achieve its revolution, but rather the individual liberation of affects, this non-identity through the speed of consumption itself, consuming everything, consuming sexual identity, consuming the geography, consuming pleasures, consuming our very being itself. That this revolution toppled the older American Revolution. The revolution of the orgy is uniquely American. So America got rid of its acts of its morality, got rid of its ideals, even got rid of its own mythopoetic history for the land of pure eminence, for the land of pure speed and acquisition of things instantaneously. So this is why Baudrillard says that politics freed itself within the spectacle. Because what does political liberation, what does neoliberalism and liberalism itself promise? Liberalism promises freedom from all distinctions. Liberalism, as Burnham, as that guy who wrote The Demon in Democracy wrote, egalitarianism is the liberation of all political difference. It is nihilism, in a way. But like Baudrillard says here something very different about Europe. He says that we in Europe are stuck in the old rut of worshiping difference. This leaves us with a great handicap when it comes to radical modernity, which is found in the absence of difference. Only very reluctantly do become modern and indifferent. I would argue that Western Europe is already there. I argue that certainly Britain is already Americified, but this is why our very own modernity is so lackluster. This is why our undertakings lack that which pushes innovation to the point of extravagance, and in doing so, rediscovers a kind of fantastical liberation. Tocqueville speaks of revolution, the political freedom, of the quality of public spirit. Our abstract revolutions are the process of failing in this other revolution too. We absorb these logical consequences of modernity, of this lifestyle revolution. So the American liberal project that is infecting the world promises to liberate you from all ideology and liberate you from all political distinctions. Because to think outside of liberalism is impossible to the gay, the global American empire. Why would you want to go back to difference? Why would you want to go back to not being equal, to not being equal consumers? Because this is the lifestyle revolution that America is inflicting upon the world. American identity is a fiction. It is the quote unquote liberation of being able to consume your own identity. That is what Baudrillard is saying. That can only be created by the capacity of technology, by the American experiment not having a history because it is the new world, and that sort of new world identity or lack thereof, that informs the subject. So Baudrillard is saying that this is how politics implies political difference. Politics implies that ideology and political vision is something that we can haggle over, something that we can go to war over, something that we can instantiate ourselves by. But America does not promise real, genuine political freedom because there is no political freedom. There is only global liberalism. There is only the sort of soy egalitarian new American experiment from which there is no escape. Therefore, politics itself frees its own obligation. All of what Aristotle talks about man being a political being, man being one of the polis, that is no longer true. Because now the global polis is an anti-polis. There is no society, there is just consumption. There is just the fabulation Hollywood machine. Therefore, there is no politics. What politics can be found at the quote-unquote end of history? It is Hollywood. It is the corporatocracy. It is these things that have spread the end of history more than any lovey-dovey UN, we are the world, universal humanitarianism bullshit ever could. Like the 1990s, UN, Toto Africa, let's all sing "We Are the World." Oh my God, it's so amazing that we're all together in peace. Like that was all crap. And Baudrillard saw this. Baudrillard preempted the American corporatocracy because America spread its own ideals through bloodthirsty capitalism, through consumer capitalism, through woke capital. Woke capital is a social technology. Now, Baudrillard is saying that the old world has the older idea where politics is still something to be haggled over, political difference is still real, ancestral and genetic and cultural difference is still a thing. But America is a land without identity or ideal towards difference, supposedly. But as we know, America is devolving into a sort of animistic cultism. Everyone has their own little cult of identity. So, there are fortunate oases that have resisted Americanization, like the Amish / Pennsylvania Dutch. Americanization. I love that term. Nobody uses Ameriqua anymore because the Amerikaner, like the European South African phenotype, is a conglomeration of different Europeanoid forces, different European genetic lineages. There you go. So let me we've been doing an hour so far, but this whole book is fascinating. There's this other quote where Baudrillard talks about America's relation to Europe. So here he says, I'm finding here, I quoted it. We criticize America for not being able to either to analyze or to conceptualize. But this is a wrong-headed critique. It is we who imagine, so Baudrillard meaning Europeans, imagine that everything culminates in transcendence and that nothing exists which has not been conceptualized. Everything becomes concept, everything becomes philosophized. Not only do they care little for such a view in America, but their perspective is the opposite view. It is not conceptualizing reality, but realizing concepts and materializing ideas that interest them. America is the land of actualization of ideas. They care very little for ideas, but they care a lot about actually putting them into the real. Everything that has been dreamt on this side of the Atlantic has a chance of being realized on the other. To build the real out of ideas, we transform the real into ideas or into ideology. Here in America, only that which is produced or manifested has a meaning. For us in Europe, only that what can be thought of or concealed has meaning. So, America, because it lacks the historicity of continental Europe, cannot really conceptualize itself. Can Canadians conceptualize itself? Can Canada conceptualize itself? No, it can't. Because there's nothing to conceptualize but a various sort of like global airport. Canada is the, cheap motel of the world. Now, you can conceptualize a non-place, but it's very hard. Because Europe is rooted within its dwelling, with its history, with its sense of historical being. Europe resists the non-place. Europe resists the liminal space. Quebec keeps trying to conceptualize itself outside of Canada. Yeah, but Quebec is sort of like I would argue modern Quebec is like a little Potemkin village of like its own identity, but that's another stream for another time. Um so America, unlike Europe, does not have that same source of dwelling, what Heidegger calls dwelling. But instead, America can actualize ideas. America has the might, it has the primitivistic vitality, it has the technological capacity to make their own ideals somewhat real. But what Baudrillard says is that America imposes its own abstract machine, its own ability to translate the virtual into the actual onto the rest of the world. So American ideals are thought up in America, but then they become real on the other side of the world. So this current crisis we have now, Russia is fighting in some ways against history, or rather the end of history. Russia has become the force of history that wants to impose its own Eurasian picture of the old world into the future. America makes its own political ideal. NATO, the global American empire, creates this idea of perpetual peace through its own jannying of the world, right? But America cares not for the material reality on the ground as long as the idea is imposed. So it doesn't matter that their own actions, their own ideals, are in some ways causing an immense amount of destruction, but it's the ideal itself that must become actualized for Americans. That is what Baudrillard is saying. What America thinks up on this side of the Atlantic, over on the other side of Atlantic in Europe or over in the Pacific or elsewhere, that is where it becomes ideal. It becomes actualized. So America is like this abstract machine that creates its own fictions it imposes on the rest of the world. So then Baudrillard says, this is why our own idea of modernity is lackluster. We do not even have the evil genius of modernity. America has the evil genius of modernity. This genius which pushes innovation to the point of extravagance, and in doing so, rediscovers a kind of fantastical liberty. It is the fantastical fiction being that is the ultimate liberation. Because America doesn't have a politics in the sense that one's own history informs political difference. So Aristotle gets thrown out the window, the politics gets thrown out the window. But rather, America creates fictional being that politics frees itself in. So what is Floydism? You know what I mean? The summer of Floyd. What are we seeing in Ukraine? What is the sign out of every embassy now? Ukraine can't breathe. I've seen that. It was in the that one particular nation in the Middle East hung that sign in the embassy in Kiev. Think of that for a moment now. Think of Floydism. Think of American domestic racial politics being inflicted throughout the world, being a sort of abstract machine that takes very complex political issues and breaks them down into very easy Americanized signifiers, right? That's what global Floydism is. So think of very complex relationship between those two nations. Now think of this. When you say Ukraine can't breathe or you have murals of Floyd everywhere, St. Floyd, you have demonstrations, you have sort of, color whatevers in other nations that follow a very specific model. It's because politics is no longer the politics of difference in the old world mindset. Rather, it is an anti politics. Floydism is an anti politics because it relies on the spectacle. It relies on fictional being, on spectacle being to create real, concrete geopolitical differences. It is a culture war issue. Culture war is the subsuming of politics into the spectacle. Floydism is a spectacle. Therefore, the spectacle transforms through Americanization of the world, transforms localist political grievances, transforms the geographic, cultural, and racial differences of particular nations throughout the world. And it territorializes them with fiction and narrative being that comes from America. That is why Floydism is a political model of the spectacle. Because politics is no longer a force in itself. It is a spectacle which creates politics. So I believe I have one more thing here. Then I have to go. We've been going for almost an hour and a half. Wow. So here he says, America always gives me a feeling of real asceticism. Culture, politics, and sexuality too are seen exclusively in terms of the desert, which here assumes that the statue of a primal scene. Everything disappears before that desert vision. Every body, by an ensuing effect of undernourishment, takes on a transparent form, a lightness near to complete disappearance. Because of the Hollywood abstract machine, everything is surface level as to disappear. Everything is so evanescent. Every culture war issue is so transparent that there really is nothing there in America. So the desert takes everything. A lightness near to complete disappearance. Everything around me suffers from the same desertification. You know what desertification means? It means that in an ecology such as the rainforest, when you've gotten rid of that natural flora and fauna, when you've strip mined an environment, because the roots cannot the sort of very diverse plant life in nature that grows in the desert, or rather grows in the rainforest, for example, because all of the water and all the nutrients are at the very top of the ecology, the very surface, as soon as you've gotten rid of all of that plant life, desertification happens because the roots cannot sustain anything because all of the life was on the surface of it in these old growth forests. So, desertification in America, in terms of culture, in terms of sexuality, is when everything is so surface level. Religiosity, politics, everything, culture itself. Because everything is surface level. underneath is bareness. There is no nutrients underneath because America lacks a history the way that continental Europe has a history. There is literally no roots to nourish the ground because the roots of plant life, they put water and nutrients into the soil. So therefore in America, the soil is barren underneath. Yeah, the Zizekian desert of the real, exactly. This is where, of course, Zizek, he gets it from Baudrillard. Even the body, by the ensuing effect of undernourishment, takes on a transparent form, a lightness near to completion disappears. Everything around me suffers the same desertification, but this radical experimentation is the only thing that enables me to get through and produce this astral quality I have found anywhere else. What does the American liberal project of the melting pot, what does it promise? It promises total liberation from history. But Baudrillard is saying that that's a bad thing because there literally is nothing there. When you take diverse peoples and mash them into the same geography and destroy their culture and destroy their dwelling, their rootedness, then they become nothing. Their ethics become this homogeneous, universal liberal humanitarianism, which has nothing at its base. Their identity becomes deracinated. And so Baudrillard comes off with this radical reactionary critique of Americana. Now, I would say that there are places in America that has roots. There is a hidden history of America that is very much, a mysterious being that manifests itself in weird sort of like neo-animistic ways. There's this great video by my friend the Prudentialist. Watch this after the stream, where he talks about the European forest versus the American forest. And I would say that the work of art as well between Europe and America translates in this as well. So after the stream, go and watch it. I believe it's Prudentialist's newest video. So then Baudrillard says that, where is it? Oh my God, here it is. Like, share, subscribe, go to my donation link. In reality, you do not, as I have hoped, get any distance on Europe from here. You do not acquire a fresh angle on it. When you turn around, it has quickly simply disappeared to the point that there is really no need to adopt a critical stance on Europe from here. That is something you can do in Europe. But what there is to criticize, which has not been criticized 1,000 times before, what you have to do is to enter the fiction of America. Enter America as fiction. It is indeed on the fictive basis that it dominates the world, even as if every detail of America were insignificant. America is something that is beyond us. America is a giant hologram in the sense that it informs concerning the whole. And since that information concerns the whole, is contained in each of its elements. Take the tiniest little place in the desert, any old street in Midwest town, a parking lot, a California house, a Burger King, or a Starbucks. You have the whole of the U.S. South, north, east, and west. Holographic, also in that it is, it has the coherent light of the laser, the homogeneity of the single element scanned by the same beams. From the visual and the plastic viewpoints too, things seem to be made of a more unreal substance. They seem to turn and move in a void as if by the special light effect. Meaning that in America, the hologram is a single picture that when you turn the hologram, the whole image changes. Everywhere you go in America, there is that sort of holographic nature of Americana, where everything is information. America won the quote-unquote information war. All of this talk about disinformation, that is uniquely American. Because America is the land of technology and technological information apparatuses. That is what informs the fabulation machine, the Hollywood abstract machine. That is how America inflicts its fiction upon the world, is through information technology. So you have this sort of holographic nature of America, where as soon as you go to every little spot in America, no matter how large or how tiny, every single franchise, every little nook and cranny has that same metaphysical being of America. It has that same American fiction. In Europe, it doesn't possess that. There is no, despite whatever ghouls like Richard Spencer say, there's no such thing as a pan-European identity. There's just pure difference in Europe. In America, there is sameness. Everywhere is like a hologram, where every point moves together in the hologram, that when it's hit by the light, every single node on the hologram moves as one. Everything in America is one. It is a paramedian whole, like Paramides, right? So here, Baudrillard says that America is neither dream nor reality. It is hyperreality. It is hyperreal because it is utopia which has behaved from the very beginning as though it was already achieved. America, in its very inception, thinks of itself as the shining hill on the rock among a sea of ignorance and superstition and old world relations. America, in a way, was that social engine that created the whole world in its eyes. It is not an empire in the sense that it all is conquering space. Rather, America, from its beginning, thought that it would conquer space eventually, all geography. Everything here is real and pragmatic, and yet it is all the stuff of dreams, too. It may be the truth of America can only be seen by a European, since he alone will discover here the perfect simulacrum, that of the eminence and material transcription of all values. The Americans, for their part, have no sense of simulation. They are themselves simulation in the most developed sense, but they have no language in which to describe it, since they themselves are the model, the American citizen. What is the American post-war doctrine? Remember in Vietnam War that in every Vietnamese person is an American yearning to be free, right? That's what America thinks of other peoples. As a result, they are the ideal material for analysis of all possible variants of the modern world. The American subject is the modern subject in its purest apex apotheosis form, because the American subject is itself a fiction. It is a created being that has freed itself of all subjectivity and all roots to become this new being of pure fiction being. Because America, what Baudrillard is saying, is not a total unreality or a total dream or an ideal, but rather hyperreality. It is something that lies in the middle of the real and the virtual. It is something in between dreams and in between the material. No more and no less, in fact, they were primitive societies of their day. The same mythical, analytical excitement that made us look towards those earlier societies today impels us to look in the direction of America with the same passion and the same prejudices. America, by destroying the roots of its people, lends itself to a form of high-tech neo-primitivism, but a primitivism that may destroy the ecology of the world, but is primitive in character in that it lacks the development of high civilization. Because the American social reality at its roots is this like create your own reality thing. Now it has the high technology of a civilization. It is the perfection of high civilization. But once you get to a postmodern state where there is no grand narrative, you then mimic primitive societies on the social and cultural level. Because America is like this technological apparatus that has neo-tribalism at its base. That is what America is. Now, there are many things in this book that you can cover. Let me go to one last point. Where is it? So here he says the only question is the journey. So the amnesic, the aesthetic, asymptomatic character of disappearance succumbs to the affects and worldly semiology. This sort of travel creates its own particular type of event in innervation, as it always has its own special form of fatigue, like a filibration of muscles, strided by the excessive heat and speed, by the excessive things seen or read, of places passed through and forgotten. The defibrillation of the body overloaded with empty signs, functional gestures, the blinding brilliance of the sky, and somnambulistic distances is the very slow process. The only question of this journey is how far can we go to the extermination of meaning? How far can we go in the non-referential desert from without cracking up, and of course still kept alive in the esoteric charm of disappearance? So in travel in America, all things disappear. It is not like in other places of the world where you are going to see something. You are going to see a very particular product of that nation, of that history, of that culture. In America, when you're doing the road trip thing, you are literally traveling for no reason. So, yeah, you are traveling in sort of travel in America becomes a sort of disappearance. You are traveling away from your circumstances towards nothing. You are just traveling for its own sake. Um, yes, Baudrillard is like the capstone of postmodernism. Yes, Schizo Ricardo. Um, a theoretical question there materialized in the objective conditions of a journey, which is no longer a journey, and therefore carries with it the fundamental rule: aim for the point of no return. Remember, America closed the frontier. America is the end of history. America is traveling to nowhere. Is the end of all relations that we once had. This is the key, and the crucial moment is the brutal instance, and this brutal instant which reveals that the journey has no end, and there is no longer any reason for it to come to an end beyond a certain point. It is movement itself that changes. So America colonizes the world with its own end of history vision, even though there is no reason for it. Because when there is no historical relations, when there is no space to conquer, when there is no purpose through one's own ancestral rivalries, one's own sense of being through our own history, there is just movement. Why does America keep wanting to conquer the world? Because it can. Why has America's cultural and military and political vision that is really an anti-politics, why does it persist? Because it can. Because after a point in sort of like end of history global liberalism that is really Americanization, what is the point anymore? If you've conquered all difference, if we live in this global so egalitarian utopia that really isn't a utopia, things will still continue to be, because at the end of history, things will still happen. But the events of history cease to be. Events take place, but history ceases because there is no historical development of history, because history implies difference. And when there is no difference, when there is no rival system, there is just pure motion. And therefore, peoples disappear. When you come to America, your identity disappears. You become subsumed under the apparatus of speed, of consumption, of the fluidity of identity, and therefore your history grounds to a halt. You become a historyless being. Movement which moves through space of its own volition changes all resistance. End of the scene of the journey as such. So, like Hollywood movies represent this perfectly, right? What do you think the hero's journey has become in Cape shit in Marvel Cinematic Universe? There is no end in sight. There is just a repetition of form. Because to have a goal implies difference. Is there any difference between superheroes? Fundamentally, apart from different attributes, apart from different, I mean, all the stories are similar. All of their superpowers are different, but it's like a video game. It's like character customization. There is no fundamental history there. There is just this singular monosyllabic triumph of the good over evil, and what that good is changes like the wind. So now superheroes are woke or whatever, right? So the jet engine is no longer an energy of space penetration, but proposes itself energy of space penetration. Proposes itself by creating a vacuum in front of it that sucks it forward, and instead of supposing itself as a traditional model upon the air's resistance. In this way, the centrifugal eccentric point is reached, where movement produces the vacuum that sucks you in. The movement, the constant movement of America at the end of history sucks in all relations. This movement of vertigo is also the movement of potential collapse, not as much from the tiredness generated by the distance and the heat, but from the irreversible advance into the desert of time. Remember, the desert is a non-fixed space. You know how people that get lost in the desert, they sort of like lose a sense of time? Why do you think there's missing time in UFO abductions and in 411 events, right? Because in that space, time is difficult to judge, sort of like the ocean, right? Sort of like in space. America conquered the oceans, America conquered space. Like, I think space is fake. It's really the firmament. But you know what I mean. I'm only half joking with that, by the way. And America conquered the desert. Think about it. America is always conquering open space, because there is, what Baudrillard is saying is that in the desert, in the ocean, apart from, little islands here and there is no fixed space from which you can travel. Therefore, America represents this desert where time is obliterated, because time implies narrative of being, right? You narrativize yourself based on your own history. But when you have a land without history, there is no time. There is no dwelling. So Baudrillard arrives at a very Heideggerian point. Without no time, there is no being. There is just the fiction that we create for ourselves. If Heidegger were to look at the modern American society, he would say that everything is inframed, because everything is just available for consumption. What does Giorgio Agamben say in Profanations? That consumption does not imply use. It implies annihilation. You consume a perishable good. You consume armaments. You consume things. You do not use them like you have tools, right? Because again, Agamben gets this from Heidegger. Tool use, right? Like my readiness to hand. With the consumer good, there is no readiness to hand. When you consume something, you obliterate it. Whereas when you have a tool, it implies a history. It implies a use value. America is a land of pure consumption of all things that has no use value. This is what Giorgio Agamben is saying. So this is what Baudrillard is saying. And again, this is what Heidegger would say. That there is no time in America. America is the desert. America is a land of open space that only has the surface. And from it is the mirage of the spectacle. People, anchorites that go into the desert, sadhus, holy fathers, the desert fathers in Christianity, the sadhus in India. The desert is a spiritual place because it has no relation to any fixed thing. It does not have dwelling. There is an old Sufi saying that the desert is where you go to empty yourself, and the Lord fills you. Allah fills you. Meaning that the desert is a place of pure emptiness. Now, when you go to the desert for a spiritual purpose in mind, you are purifying yourself. You are emptying yourself for the Lord. To the sadhus in India, to the Sufis, to the early church fathers, the anchorites. But in America, the land of the desert, America has no history. America has no time because all time is consumed by speed, by the instantaneity of information technology. Therefore, because America lacks time, America lacks being. That is what America is. So I will probably read more of it. Like, share, subscribe. The content-minded podcast, if I can get the banner image done, drops next week. Please subscribe. Please like. Please donate if you must. My PayPal link is there. And the content-minded podcast, my first guest, my voyage guest, will be King Salmon Fish. That'll be amazing. And also tomorrow, exciting news, ladies and gentlemen. It might come out a week or two from now. But I have secured the first interview with Kroner. Kroner, who has made the seminal, amazing 4-part e-girl documentary. This stuff, I hate to say it, even though he's always been kind to me, it rivals that of meme analysis, my opinion. So go and check out the e-girl documentary on the Kroner's channel. Actually, let me link it into the chat. I will link. I have to shill for my friend. So I am going to let me see. YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe while I'm doing this. So I have secured the first interview with Kroner. Where is it? E-girl. So here is the first one, E-girl part 1. Let me find it here. Where is? Oh, here it goes. Here we go. I'm just clicking the link. Come on. So I'm going to interview Kroner. Here is in the chat the E-girl documentary part 1. I believe he's going to drop part 4 tonight. But part 1 is about Britney Spears and bedrooms and bathwater. It's about Belle Delphine. The second part is about, I think, Britney Spears and the hero. The third part is about the mommy GF. The third part's wild, by the way. And I think the fourth part's dropping tonight. So please go and subscribe to his channel. Subscribe to me. I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow for the podcast. So next week, I'm going to drop the first content-minded podcast. It's going to be amazing. It's with King Salmon Fish. You can't miss it. And hopefully, like Laid Back Saturdays, it's going to be a regular feature. Maybe not every week, but maybe every 2 weeks or so, I will drop a hot interview. I'm going back to the original spirit of Break the Rules, where I'm going to interview some weird, interesting people. Philip Daniel, do I need intro music? I'm thinking about intro music, actually. I might either take something from you, or I'm going to take something from Matthew, who makes music as well. Will you upload the podcast on podcast services? If the podcast does go well, I probably will subscribe. Like, I'll probably get it on Apple Podcast or something like that. So that's an interesting idea. But yeah, so I also have to upload all of my longer form stuff on my Odyssey as a backup in case, something, knock on wood, something dramatic doesn't happen. But so yes, it's going to be amazing. Stay tuned. I have a hard cutoff right now. I'm going to meet a friend who has come from Toronto. I actually might record something with him too. Um, he is a friend of the frogs, and yeah, he used to go by GSP on Twitter. So yes, thank you one and all. This has been great. I want to do maybe I'll do a follow-up reading of America. Please comment on this, like, comment, subscribe. Go to my Substack. I'm going to have amazing fire stuff for the Substack, including my series on the E-Right. But I'm doing this long form for 1776. I'm 1776. Thank you. I probably will do some more readings, even if a video on America by Jean Baudrillard. God bless. Goodbye. Click the bell, donate, like, subscribe, all of this. God bless. Too sweet. Content Minded Podcast coming next week. I'll see you then.